Hello and happy Halloween. First of all, I just wanted to say thanks to everybody who checked out my last video, the Ralph Breaks the Internet video. I can now proudly say, in the time since that last video came out, my subscribers have doubled since the last time we met, which sounds impressive until you actually look at the total number of subscribers. Don't pay any attention to that. It's not a lot so far, maybe to you, but to me it really does mean a lot that people are subscribing, sticking around, wanting to hear more from me. It means a lot. And if you're new to the channel and you like what you see here, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all the things so you don't miss anything. And if you're new, let me bring you up to speed. I have essentially been going through the entire Walt Disney Animation Studios catalog in just a completely random order, constructing a tier list, comparing them to each other, doing all just giving each of them their own individual space to talk about them, because I just really like talking about them. And it's been a lot of fun so far. I've been going just completely arbitrarily spinning this wheel to have it being as random and chaotic as possible. But this video is the one exception, the one that I actually scheduled for a specific time, and that is The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, because with Halloween coming, I felt like, this movie that has an explicitly Halloween section within it, it just fit right. It fit the timing just worked out. So, if you're wondering, well, what is an Ichabod and what is a Mr. Toad, and what does that have to do with Disney, and why is there a movie with that bizarre of a title, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad? Well, to answer all of those questions, we need to discuss a little bit of let me push my glasses up here, a little bit of Disney film history. So, back in the late 30s, early 40s, you had what is called the golden age of Disney animation. First you had, Snow White, the movie that started it all, the movie that pioneered animation and proved that animation could work in film. It was a massive hit, still one of the highest grossing movies of all time when you adjust for inflation. Set the foundation, and Walt Disney took that foundation and ran with it. And so you had Snow White, Pinocchio, Fantasia, Dumbo, Bambi. 5 movies that are all considered classics by at least the majority of people, except, well, I guess there'd be some debate about Fantasia because that one's a bit more, that one I think is maybe a bit more artsy, a bit more obscure. But generally speaking, this was when Disney made a name for itself and was pushing the art of animation forward. But all of that came to a screeching halt in the early 40s because there was, this minor little thing going on. You might have heard of it. World War II, the deadliest conflict in the history of mankind. And so naturally, people weren't exactly focused on cute elephants that could fly or talking deer in the midst of a worldwide crisis. So to keep their doors open, Disney basically had to do 2 things. One, and more, controversially with today's media and everything, they had to sort of let a lot of their staff leave the company to go do war propaganda commissioned by the US government. And a lot of that has aged very poorly. It's very ridiculous and easy to make fun of and all of that. But at the same time, we still got to be making movies so that our, movie making company doesn't go out of business. So while a lot of their staff was over doing the World War II propaganda, they had basically whoever was left over was sticking around and making movies, but in order to save on budget, save on time, like they, instead of doing like one grand story, you know, like the story of Snow White, the story of Pinocchio, they basically packaged together a bunch of shorter stories that sometimes connected, sometimes like they tried to have some kind of theme with it, but it was mostly arbitrary. And so you get what is known as the wartime or the package era of Disney. And to this day, because of the nature of these films, when they came out, the fact that they don't really have a lot of cohesion to them, and the fact that they're sandwiched between the Golden Age and the Silver Age of Disney, which is when they all got back together and made like Cinderella, Peter Pan, Jungle Book, Sleeping Beauty, all those classics. This era is probably the single most obscure in the entire Disney catalog. And Ichabod and Mr. Toad is actually the very last one of these, and sticks out from most of the other ones because out of the 6 package era films that exist, 4 of them follow the formula of, okay, let's just get a bunch of these shorts, like varying in length, like a couple minutes or a bit longer, and just sort of, you know, mashing them together. Ichabod and Mr. Toad is one of 2, along with Fun and Fancy Free, which we'll cover in its own video, as not nearly as fun or as fancy as the title implies, that basically did 2 much longer shorts and just kind of put them together in one movie. And in the case of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, as the title implies, you have the story of Ichabod, or Ichabod Crane from The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and Mr. Toad from The Wind in the Willows. Because make no mistake, even though we were in a much more time restricted, much more budgetary restricted era, Disney was still basically making money off the backs of older stories that they were just sort of adapting into film. Like, that hadn't changed. They were still very willing to piggyback off of those kinds of stories. And so, that's how we got Ichabod and Mr. Toad. So as we start off here, there's this framing device, you know, like, again, trying to sort of make these these stories connect into a movie, even though they don't really connect. I actually think Ichabod and Mr. Toad does a better job than most of the other package era movies, because you have this framing device of talking about, like, you have 2 narrators here, one more English and one American, talking about, like, you know, the great characters of their respective literature. And it almost, the way, maybe this is just me in my imagination, but it almost sounds like these 2 guys are sitting in a pub somewhere, like, you know, yeah, my country has created the truly great works of literature, like Mr. Toad. He is truly nothing your pitiful American minds can think of can truly comprehend the majesty of Mr. Toad. And the American guys over here will, I'll see your Toad and raise you a guy who gets attacked by a Headless Horseman. Because that's the American way. You know, that's sort of the vibe I get here. But the Mr. Toad segment starts off with this narrator who, from what I was able to look at in the credits, is a guy named Basil Rathbone, and a quick search on Wikipedia tells me that he was a somewhat prominent actor in film around this time, like English actor around this time, and he was really big in like early Shakespeare productions around this time, and like some old like Sherlock Holmes stuff, which is very funny because as he starts the Mr. Toad segment off, he asks you, like, who do you consider the greatest character in English literature? And he lists Sherlock Holmes and all these other people, like, you know. So there's that funny in joke of, yeah, you know, that other character I played anyway. And it's also funny because among the characters listed, you have Oliver Twist, Robin Hood, and King Arthur, all of whom got Disney movies adapting their stories way down the line. So it's like you have the funny in joke already of, yeah, I played Sherlock, whatever. And in hindsight, oh wait, all of these characters get Disney movies. I just think that's kind of a fun bit of trivia. But getting into the actual story a bit, the Mr. Toad short is kind of weird when paired with Ichabod short, because when we get to the Ichabod in just a bit, it's a lot more, like I said, that's where the Halloween stuff comes in. That one's a lot more serious and has a lot more going on with it. Whereas this Wind in the Willows thing is kind of just, you know, whimsy and nonsense. And so, yeah, let's just get right into it. Basically, the story goes that the titular Mr. Toad is the prestigious owner of this Toad Hall, very creatively named, I might add. And he's very, like, you know, just kind of a goofball, like eccentric, to use a proper English term. Like, they basically establish him as somebody who's constantly chasing mania, they say, like whatever the newest fad is, you know, like in the case at the start of this story, he's become obsessed with cars because they're fast. You gotta go fast. Knew I'd get the sneaky Sonic reference in there somewhere. But and then he goes out against the wishes of his friends and is so enamored with trying to get a car for himself to drive that the next thing they know, he is on trial for supposedly having stolen a car. and the courtroom scene is just kind of absurd, because basically first of all, the prosecution is clearly unhinged and is leading the witness constantly, and basically makes the case of, yeah, no, he just straight up stole that car. That's all there is to it. You don't need to hear anything more. No, witness, you don't need to finish your sentence. Shut up. Good day. And Mr. Toad decides to counter by telling the story of what actually happened with his friendly horse, who he rides on as his steed, but is also his friend. I don't know. This is a movie where animals and humans are coexisting and talking to each other like it's nothing. Whatever. Anyway, basically the way he tells it is this whole ordeal happened because he went out to this guy named Mr. Winky, and he actually made a deal for the car. It wasn't he didn't know it was stolen, actually. It was these weasels had stolen this car a while back. He just happened to be the one who was caught with it, but he didn't know it was stolen at the time. He made a deal to basically trade the deed of Toad Hall for this car, not realizing that it was stolen. And that's what happened. And the prosecutor, of course, is like, he doesn't accept this, and his logic is, you wouldn't be that stupid. You wouldn't trade the deed to your prestigious Toad Hall for a dumb car that could break down immediately, for all you know. But Mr. Toad calls for Mr. Winky to testify for him and prove that this agreement happened. And this Mr. Winky guy, being the obviously evil character that he is, what with the sneaky grin and mustache that lets you know, and his ridiculous name. Like this, what were you thinking making a deal with this guy, dude? He immediately testifies that no, you were trying to. That deal never happened. I don't know what you're talking about. You were trying to sell me a stolen car, and with that testimony, the court is immediately done. Like his whole case falls apart, and he ends up in prison. And just a second. Let me rewind that real bit. I'm sorry. I know this is meant to be a nonsense story, and maybe I'm bringing a little too much logic into it, but let me just follow the logic of this court for a bit. So he's too stupid, or the deal that he claims to have made is too stupid to be believable, because you wouldn't trade a prestigious Toad Hall for a car. But he is stupid enough to call up a witness who will gleefully testify against him? What? like you don't believe this story, and his attempt to address that story just makes him even dumber, but you're okay with this kind of dumb but not that kind of what? Which is it? But anyway, he ends up in jail, is sad about it for a grand total of like a minute before immediately, busting out of prison to go fix everything, which leads to a bit of a goofy chase. Like there's one moment that did get me where he's escaping, and you have like this train full of guys that are all like firing their pistols wildly with no safety on, because because that's how law enforcement works, I guess. Sure. And then he goes to his friends, apologizes for the mess he's made, and they go to basically seize the deed from Mr. Winky, who has now basically taken over the place and is actually in charge of all the weasels who stole the car in the first place, because this was all his like harebrained scheme to take over the place or anything, or something like that. I don't know why they need to have the deed to prove Mr. Toad's innocence when the very presence of Mr. Winky and all these weasels should prove that the deal was made, because he's running Toad Hall now. But whatever, I'm bringing too much logic into this. It's nonsense. So you get this really long, extended chaos sequence that feels like right out of a Looney Tune cartoon, honestly, with all the slapstick and everything. And up until this point, like, if you can't tell, I was really checked out mentally. There was just not a lot going on here. But this climax did thankfully bring it up a bit, because the animation is pretty fluid and there's a lot of fun stuff going on here. There's it's a really epic moment towards the end where, as they're trying to take the deed, it's like formed in like paper airplane, and Mr. Toad basically takes a bunch of other papers and throws a couple other paper airplanes out there, sort of doing the thing from Kung Fu Panda almost, of, oh yeah, like, which one is it, ha ha ha, and like takes the real deed and sneaks out. And then, with the real deed in hand, he proves his innocence. Mr. Winky and all of the weasels go away, and the day is saved. Except no, because Mr. Toad has found new mania, and it's airplanes. Because don't you just love it when you go through a whole story and then it feels like the characters learn nothing, so you just wasted the last half hour of this movie, like the last half hour of your life watching this short, and only for the characters to have learned nothing from their experience. Don't you just love when that happens? So yeah, Mr. Toad stuff, nonsense. It's kind of drags on a bit. There's some fun animation there, but the story is kind of, it's But thankfully, this is where Ichabod comes in. And like I said, you have Basil Rathbone, this like prominent English guy. Like, yes, this is truly the pinnacle of fine literature. Which you seriously passed up King Arthur for a toad, my guy? I question that logic, but whatever. And then the American narrator comes in and says, I'll see your Mr. Toad and raise you Ichabod. And this ain't just any narrator. This is Bing Crosby. And if you don't know who Bing Crosby is, he was basically, like, in the time that this movie was coming out, and for a good while, like, he was one of the big, like, jazz and pop musicians in America in the 20th century. Like, he was a big deal back then. So the fact that even though Disney was under some, like, financial troubles in this era, the fact that they were able to get Bing Crosby to be a part of one of their movies shows that they were still very prominent despite this, like, struggle that they were going through. Like, they got Bing Crosby, and that's awesome. One thing that's a bit different from Mr. Toad is a lot of the voice acting in Mr. Toad. Like, you had, like, a bunch of different actors doing it, but most of the voice acting in the Ichabod segment is Bing Crosby doing the narration, doing voices for Ichabod and for Brom Bones and all that. But it works because it's Bing Crosby, and we love Bing Crosby. But anyway, getting to the actual story of this thing, there's one thing about the story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow as it's called, there's one thing about this, before we get to the actual, like, the spooky Halloween stuff, the actual setup for this story really sticks out to me amongst most of Disney for one very clear reason. You know how most Disney movies, you know, you got, like, hero, villain, like obvious character root for, obvious dark big bad that you need to defeat, whatever. This ain't nothing like that. It seems like it at first. Like, you're introduced to Brom Bones, who a lot of people have made comparisons to Gaston with how he's introduced. Like the guy that everyone in town loves, the big tough guy, kind of brutish. And then you have Ichabod Crane, this sort of quirky guy walking into town. Everybody starts singing about him, a lot like Belle at the beginning of Beauty and the Beast, sort of like, who's this strange person? They don't quite fit in, but there's something about them that fascinates them. But it is not that simple. It is not Ichabod good guy, Brom Bones bad guy. No. As a matter of fact, the way the narrator describes Brom Bones actually doesn't make him out to be malicious at all. He straight up says there's no malice in him. He says he's, you know, town hero, like, nice guy. You see him, like, pouring out drinks for all his buddies, like, being a good, friendly guy, and it describes him as, like, you know, he enjoys a good prank, but there's no malice in his mischief. You know, he's just your average, friendly guy that everybody just likes because he's a good guy. And then Ichabod walks in, and, like, you know, he's kind of quirky and everything, but, you know, there are a lot of Disney protagonists that are quirky. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is, during this song that everybody's singing about who's that walking down the street, are they shovels or are they feet? Like, the new schoolmaster, what's his name? Ichabod Crane, all this stuff. At one point during the song, he, you know, opens this door for this woman like a true gentleman and everything, as she's carrying a bunch of pies on her head. And, you know, that's just nice little thing. Until a couple seconds later, when he walks away and he slipped one of the pies from her and eats it whole. Excuse me. That's theft. And also pure gluttony. And in case you thought, oh, that's just a one-off gag, immediately after the song ends and he takes his position as the new schoolmaster of town, you see him in the classroom literally inspecting his students' lunches to see if there's anything good in there. So, right off the bat, the traditional idea of hero and villain in this story is completely flipped on its head. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but trust me, it gets more like this. Like, it's sort of right after this, it seems like it reverts back to like what you're used to, because you have a little bit of, you know, Ichabod. He's like just being this charming guy. All the women are in love with him, and Brom Bones kind of pranks him a bit while he's doing this little like singing thing with the women in town. He like has his dogs sitting outside the window howling at just the right moment to make it sound like Ichabod's voice cracked, which is pretty funny. But, you know, again, what the narrator said is there's no real malice in his mischief. He's just, you know, new guy in town, little bit of some fun with him. But that's where Katrina comes in. And Katrina is where this goes from just a simple, good-natured, fun rivalry into pure anger and like true menace, but on both sides. Because Katrina, you know, it's the typical, you know, like two guys fighting over a girl that they want. But Katrina's a bit different from how you would usually expect this to go, where like you have the girl just kind of annoyed and wanting the two guys to just not hate each other. Katrina actively encourages it. Like, her introduction song has her using her like charm and her beauty to get people to do things for her. And then like they establish Brom Bones is into her, and then Ichabod is into her, and it's as though she's basically stoking the flames of this rivalry from both of these guys because it gets her attention. And if you think I'm making that up, it explicitly says that later in the story as they're getting ready for the Halloween party. It explicitly says, like, Brom Bones is like the guy who's been after her for a while and wanting to have her, and Ichabod's sort of the new guy. And the narration explicitly says she invites Ichabod over to the Halloween party specifically to keep this rivalry going because she's having so much fun watching these two guys fight over her. Like, so even the source of the conflict, Katrina, like the thing that they're fighting over, even she is not a black and white character. She is a lot, all three of the main characters in this story are a lot more gray. And this is where Ichabod shows his true colors even more, because where Brom Bones, you know, who's supposed to be the antagonist of this story, like constantly harassing him, constantly getting violent and angry with Ichabod in increasingly comical ways with hilarious slapstick. Like, there's this one bit when Ichabod just like opens the door, like he's gone to Katrina's house with Brom Bones also being out there trying to get in, like he's trying to open the door, and Ichabod just slams it open without even realizing he's there. And there's like this brief moment where he almost looks like he turned into a Minecraft character for a second, because he's just completely like flat and square for a split second there. It's hilarious. But anyway, yeah, like Brom Bones meant to be like the antagonist of the story, and yet he seems to be into Katrina genuinely for her and like for the relationship that they might have. When Ichabod fantasizes about Katrina, sure, at first it seems like, oh, Katrina, like my darling, like he's picturing her, how beautiful she is. And then his fantasy suddenly shifts in focus to her father's like enormous farm full of wealth, full of all of this, like basically being a gold mine. Like if he basically comes to the conclusion of, you know, if I get to be with Katrina, if I nail this, I'm set for life. It's really, really messed up the way they do it, because he straight up thinks about her father and, like, you know, he won't be around long, and when he's gone, that's when I cut in. It uses that like exact wording. That's when I cut in. Like, he is going to get with this girl who he's the only care he seems to have about her is mostly for, she's pretty. And then his main motivation is, when her old father, he's gonna keel over any day now, and that's when I profit. So we have a Disney protagonist whose entire motivation for getting the girl is for her father's wealth and for her good looks and nothing else. And we have a Disney antagonist who genuinely just wants to be with her. And you have the person that they are both in love with pitting them against each other because she is having fun. Like, this is not what you expect from Disney. This might honestly be the most gray moral conflict in any Disney movie. And nowadays, when they try to do moral gray areas, that mostly just comes down to, oh, here's a really poorly thought out twist villain with half-baked motivations that don't make sense the more you think about it. But here's this is how you do actual questioning of what makes a hero, what makes a villain, who is the real hero of this story. But yeah, transitioning into why I chose to do this for Halloween, for most of the short, it goes about how you'd expect for it to go. Like, Ichabod, for all of his quirkiness, seems to be, winning, right? Like, Brom Bones, he's been a pretty nice guy to most people, but he cannot stand this Ichabod guy, and it's bringing out a lot of his more jerkish tendencies, and that is not making Katrina fall for him. And every single one of his attempts to mess with Ichabod keeps falling flat in increasingly hilarious ways. And even at this Halloween party, it backfires spectacularly, because he tries to separate Ichabod and Katrina from each other as they're dancing to get with Katrina, and gets this other woman who dances like a maniac, basically tries to throw her at Ichabod, but it ends up backfiring on him, and he at one point he tries to get Ichabod to fall through a trap door, which yeesh. And so yeah, not going great for him. But then, after a break in the dance, he notices Ichabod, he notices Ichabod being nervous about things. He notices that he has some serious superstitions going on, and you can almost see, they don't show a light bulb literally, but you can see the light bulb in his head as he winks. And that is when we transition into the Headless Horseman song, which, Ben Crosby's been doing the music up until this point. He's been doing a good job, but this is where he was like, all right, time to just totally knock your socks off. And he delivers this absolute fire song for the Headless Horseman. I'm just gonna say it, from pre-Renaissance days, pre-Lion King, pre-Beauty and the Beast, all of that, this is the best song to come out of all of Disney before that era. If you don't watch this movie for anything else, at the very least watch it so you can hear this song. It's catchy, it's got a fantastic beat. It has it fits the spooky vibe perfectly with the lyrics, talking about when the spooks have a midnight jamboree, they break it up with fiendish glee. Ghosts are bad, but the one that's cursed is the Headless Horseman. He's the worst. They describe demons take one look and groan. Even the most terrifying creatures in existence are afraid of this guy. And the animation in this scene like lines up with the song perfectly and like really adds to the pep, but also the creepiness of the song, because you got like Brom Bones sort of like he gets this thing that he puts over himself and like makes it look as though he's headless, and they show his shadow on the wall as though he were the Headless Horseman coming to get Ichabod. And you got all the backup singers that, like, first of all, the backup singers, their vocals absolutely crush it. Like they add a lot of like necessary, like they fit the vibe perfectly is what I'm trying to say. But also like in the context of the movie, it works even better because they're all kind of creeping up on Ichabod, like popping out in different directions to the beat of the song, almost like surrounding him, like he's suddenly in this place of like true dread and fear. And all these people, you know, they're just kind of singing a fun song. They're not thinking too hard about it. They have no idea that Brom Bones is completely like spooking the guy and trying to get rid of him. You know, it's just a fun Halloween party. We're not thinking too hard about it. But to Ichabod, this is absolutely terrifying, and it's exactly what Brom Bones wants. And Katrina's over here laughing her head off because, as established, she's just here to watch these two kill each other. Like that's all she cares about, and she's having the time of her life. But seriously, like this song, oh my goodness, I could talk about it forever. It's that good, seriously. But towards the end of this song, Brom Bones gives a solemn warning about the Headless Horseman. You know, like, if you doubt this tale is so, I met that spook just a year ago. I didn't stop for a second look, but made for the bridge that spans the brook. For once you cross that bridge, my friends, and then the backup singers come in, the ghost is through, his power ends. So keep that in mind, because after this song, and after Ichabod is completely spooked out of his mind, you see him in the dark night on his horse, you know, just really, that song, you can tell, really shook him, which is exactly what Brom Bones wants. He just wants him to, you know, that warning is basically a veiled get out of town like threat, like get out of town or the Headless Horseman's gonna get you, you know. So he's sitting here like constantly afraid, like his, like every little noise in this dark forest is getting to him. And eventually he hears a sound that's almost sounds exactly like a horse's feet, like hitting it, like hitting the ground, and he completely loses his mind, only to find, oh, it was just the wind blowing this little plant against a tree trunk. You know, it's totally fine. It's fine. He laughs like a maniac. He and his horse both having a good old laugh, like, okay, there's nothing to be afraid of. And then there's a third laugh that joins, and oh my goodness, there's the Headless Horseman. And I imagine if I were a kid sitting in the theaters in 1949 when this movie came out, if I was sitting in a dark theater at the age of 7 and I heard that laugh and saw this thing, this guy with this like maniacal laugh and no head on this black horse wielding a sword and a pumpkin, I would have lost my mind and probably not slept that week. Like, because, oh my goodness, it is incredible. And then you get just this fantastic chase sequence that's like, you know, it's not devoid of humor. Like, there's a couple like goofy moments here and there, like Ichabod hitting his head against a tree and like circling over the branch and landing on the horseman's horse, and then seeing like, oh wait, like his horse following behind it, like in a circle, like they're going around the tree in a circle, and he, you know, hits the branch again to circle back around and land on his horse. That's kind of funny. And there's also a point when he like he spots the bridge and he remembers that warning from Brom Bones, and he tries to get to it, but he accidentally spins around, and he and the horse are coming back the opposite way, right towards the Headless Horseman. And then you get like the epic moment when they clash in the air, and Ichabod looks down into the cloak and is completely horrified. You know, as the laugh, that same evil laugh just keeps going on. And then eventually he does manage to escape. Like, he gets across to the other side. And then he stops, turns around, and sees, even like the horseman stopped like Brom Bones said he would, but he takes one last throw of his flaming pumpkin, and then it cuts to black. And the narrator comes back in here and says, the next morning, all they found was a smashed pumpkin and Ichabod's hat. Again, this is a Disney movie, right? What happened to bad guy loses, good guy gets away? What? Now they do, like, they basically give you two options for what happened here. There's like, you know, like there's this rumor, you know, of, you know, Ichabod, you know, he got away, he ran off to another town, married a nice lady, settled down. But no one's buying that. That's too idealistic. No. They're all convinced that the Headless Horseman got him. And the Headless Horseman song comes back in to wrap it up, and the narrator gets spooked and runs off, and that's, you know, cuts to black. So yeah, happy, fun Disney story. You know, this, the story of a greedy, gluttonous man who is spirited away by a headless horseman. So, what do I think happened? Well, to me, I think the horseman got him because he paid way too much attention to the part about the bridge, right? You know, Brom Bones says, once you cross that bridge, my friends, the ghost is through, his power ends. But what he forgot about was what he said right before that. I didn't stop for a second look, but made for the bridge that spans the brook. Ichabod crosses the bridge. He's seemingly safe, but he stops in that moment, catches his breath, and looks back to see the pumpkin flying at him. So I don't think the horseman got his head because he was out of range, but the fact that he stopped and looked back means he completely failed to heed that warning. And of course, Brom Bones didn't know that, right? Like, he was just trying to spook the guy to run away. Or did he know? Because apparently the Disney version doesn't really do a whole lot to imply this, and seems to lean more in the direction of, no, like, the Headless Horseman is real. But apparently in the original Legend of Sleepy Hollow that this short is based off of, the original implication, like, they like the ending, they leave it ambiguous, but the implication is Brom Bones tells this story and then is the Headless Horseman. Like, he faked the whole thing, pretends to be the Headless Horseman to just completely scare Ichabod off. And most of the hinting to that is left intact, like the fact that he tells the story and everything, but there's a couple discrepancies that Disney added to more heavily imply that, no, the horseman is real. Like the moment when Ichabod and him clash and he looks down in the cloak. I mean, to be fair, Ichabod, again, is superstitious and is easily frightened, so he could have seen any number of things under there. But the implication seems to be, oh, he's looking down a cloak with no head and seeing, like, inside the guy's neck or something. And there's also, you know, the fact that the horseman genuinely stops at the bridge Whereas if he really were Brom Bones, why would he stop at the bridge? He would just keep going. He would have used that whole warning to completely throw Ichabod off his game, right? But he stops at the bridge because the story was real. Brom Bones didn't know it was real, but it was. But at least that's the interpretation that Disney seems to go with. The original book allows for that interpretation, but seems to be more on the no, it's just Brom Bones pulling the most elaborate and like freaky prank of all time. But anyway, that's the story of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. On the one hand, you got, whimsical little happy like ridiculous story about Toad wants a car. all hijinks ensue, and then you have greedy glutton and brute fighting over a woman who is actively wanting them to kill each other for her amusement, until a headless horseman comes along and spirits one of them away to who knows where. Oh yeah, and Brom Bones gets Katrina. I forgot to mention that, which is another thing. Like, the fact that he gets Katrina is kind of suspect, right? Like the fact that he got everything he wanted out of that is kind of a shifty, like, wait, that worked out a little too well for him. But yeah, two shorts, two very different in tone. So I see a lot of people like, well, why did you put these two things together? They don't really mesh well. But again, I think the framing device they go with of telling like a great story of English literature, a great story of American literature, does kind of help tie them together. And in some ways, the contrast does kind of work. Like, you got the goofier story to help kind of ease you in before they hit you with the spooky headless horseman. So overall, I think this is a pretty solid package. I don't love the Mr. Toad stuff. It's kind of, whatever. It's fine. Like, again, the last little climax with the weasels and Toad Hall and all that is kind of fun, but the build up is kind of nonsense, but not like over the top Emperor's New Groove nonsense. It's just kind of, itself. Just, it doesn't fully commit to the nonsense in a way that makes it really great. But the Ichabod half is genuinely fantastic, classic spooky Halloween. It doesn't go hard. It doesn't go too hard, because it is still like a family-friendly Disney movie. Like, it doesn't go too intense. But honestly, I miss when Disney movies weren't afraid to be this spooky. Like, this horseman he terrified me as a child. And I want the people currently working at Disney who are making these movies to look back at these older movies so they know where they've gone wrong. Because seriously, why can't we have Disney villains like this anymore? I mean, Headless Horseman's not really that. I'm just saying. So, where would I put this on my overall ranking of Disney movies? Well, I've thought about it, and I think the most appropriate ranking is B tier, but like a high B tier, because again, I really like the Ichabod stuff. Don't really care so much for the Mr. Toad stuff. If I were ranking them separately, I'd probably put Ichabod like maybe low A, high B, and Mr. Toad like high C. So I think leveling it out and putting it on like a relatively high B tier is about the best call I can go for here. So that's Ichabod and Mr. Toad, and now we shall return to the wheel to see what we get next. Okay, Oliver and Company it is.